Rumbling, rumbling.
Interconnected.
The advantage of multilingualism. Introduction. A U.S. soldier who speaks Arabic receives $1,000 more every month than his fellow soldiers who speak only English. A multinational company promotes a Belgian manager to vice president because she can speak English, French, and German in addition to her own language. A report shows that the test score of French and English bilingual Canadian children are consistently higher than the scores of the children who speak only French. A 5-year-old girl in Manchester, England, listened to her grandmother tell stories in Urdu. All of these people are enjoying the wide range of advantages of knowing more than one language. Practical advantages. The world grows more interconnected every day. Recent economic problems throughout the world have shown that it is no longer possible to think of countries in economic isolation. What happens to one country's economy is likely to have an impact on many other economies. Businesses are interconnected as well. Whereas the public wants to of Apple as a US company, Siemens as German, and Ericsson as Swedish. In fact, they are all multinational with manufacturing operations and distribution networks all over the world. Thanks to technology, smaller companies can also reach across the globe. Billions of people are connected through the internet and cell phones. The global market are no longer limited by space, time, or international borders. Language may be the final remaining barrier to global communication. A global world demands global skills. Both employees and customers are international and mobile. This means that businesses need to operate in multiple languages, and employees who can help them do that may have advantages. Who can help do that may have advantages over their colleagues who cannot. A 2010 survey of British businesses revealed that knowledge of other languages was second on a list of most desirable skills for job candidates. Just after knowledge of information technology, employers are also willing to pay more for employees with these skills. The same survey found that the average salary of employees 3 years after graduating from college was higher for students who had studied language than students who had studied math, physics, and chemistry in Canada. A 2009 study reported that fluent bilinguals earn an average of 10% more than English monolinguals and 40% more than French monolinguals. In short, there is ample evidence showing that advanced proficiency in additional language can boost earnings. At the same time, however, it is important to note that these studies compare workers who are equal in other respects. For example, in socioeconomic status and educational level. Simply knowing an in additional language cannot always compensate for disparities in the areas. Companies are willing to pay more for employees who know more than one language because there is a shortage of people with the rural skills. In a recent study, by European Commission, more than 10% of 2,000 companies in the study reported that they had lost business because of lack of language, and cultural skill in their workforce. Many described incidents of miscommunication with their business and trade partners as a result of language deficits. To increase productivity in European countries, the Commission says the ideal employee should be proficient in 2 languages beyond his or her native language, not just English. Although English is the language most widely used in business and in the greatest demand, many companies are looking for expertise in other languages as well. Business executives say that in order to remain competitive, it will be necessary to go beyond English. One U.S. business survey named Mandarin Chinese as the most important language of business after English, followed by French, Arabic, and Spanish. One measure that reflects both the global use of and demand of different languages is Internet content. English is more widely used than any other language on the Internet. However, its dominance has dropped to just over 27% of all Internet content. In 2000, English was the language of more than half the Internet content, and Chinese just over 2%. The number of Chinese Internet use increased by more than 1,000% between 2000 and 2010. Experts say the percentage of Chinese language content on the Internet is likely to overtake English. The demand for bilinguals with Chinese language proficiency is likely to grow as well. It is not only in business that knowledge of an additional language beyond English is of practical value, however. The U.S. government has made a significant investment in language training for its military force, which have traditionally relied heavily on translators. Military personnel are learning languages that are of strategic importance to the American government. One commander maintains that skill in local language is as valuable to soldier as skill with a rifle. The U.S. Secretary of Defense went even further, saying languages are the key to understanding that world. English 27, Chinese 23, other Korean, Russian, French, Arabic, German, Portuguese, Japanese, Spanish. Multilingual education. Parents today understand the economic advantage that proficiency in an additional language can bring their children, and their decisions about their children's education are often informed by this understanding. Even when their children are very young, parents seek out opportunity for them to be exposed to an additional language. Wealthy parents can provide these opportunities for their children by hiring a caregiver who speaks more than one language. bilingual babysitters and nannies are in high demand. Parents hire them to speak to their children in the hope that the exposure and interaction will help their children become bilingual. Many of the children develop some ability in the second language, particularly in understanding it. However, experts say that unless the exposure and interaction extend beyond the child's early years, the experience is unlikely to lead to proficiency. The potential benefits of bilingualism are also behind the rise of dual language immersion programs, particularly in North America and Europe. Dual immersion is not remedial education for immigrant children that people often associate with bilingual education. Instead, these programs make children who are native speakers of two languages, say Spanish and English, and attempt to build language proficiency and literacy in both languages. These programs recognize the increasing demand for bilingual and biliterate workers and the positive effects of having students who are learning English and students already fluent in English but are learning another language in the same classroom. The popularity of these programs has risen steadily in the United States, where there was more than thousands in 2011. Spanish is the most frequent second language, but the popularity of Mandarin is not far behind. In 2000, there were only 10 Chinese dual immersion programs. 10 years later, there were 75. Sometimes, the quest for proficiency in a second language, particularly English, can divide families. Some Asian families, mostly from Korea, Taiwan, and Hong Kong, have decided their children can get a better education outside of their home countries. They want their children to get a Western education and develop advanced proficiency in English. So, the mother and children go to live in Australia, Canada, New Zealand, or the United States, while the father remains home and works to support the family. In other cases, the young students go alone and live with relatives or friends. These students are sometimes referred to as parachutists or white geese, like this. The number of current white geese reach a peak of above 40,000 in 2006. Has since declined. The families believe that the sacrifice of separation and loneliness is worthwhile because the children will have an advantage when they apply for college and enter the workforce. Cognitive advantages. The practical and economic advantage of advanced second language proficiency seem clear. However, research in psychology over the past 20 years indicates that there are additional advantages of bilingualism. They show that bilingualism actually changes neural connection in the brain and improve cognitive performance outside of the domain of language. This is an enormous shift from past perspective on bilingualism. For much of the 20th century, experts thought that bilingualism was a barrier to academic success. Scientists and Educators believe that knowledge of an additional language delay language development and academic progress in language use in school. This belief was supported by data from tests of the cognitive ability of bilingual and monolingual students, which reveal consistently superior performance by the monolinguals. Subsequently, however, more sophisticated tests contradicted the result and showed that bilinguals reach the milestone of language development at about the same time as monolingual children. As an analysis of the earlier tests showed that the tests were flawed because they were really a kind of language test. This put the bilingual children at a disadvantage because the tests were in their weaker language. The scientists needed to develop a test of the children's cognitive ability that was not also a language test. When they began to use nonverbal tests, such as asking the children to chart shapes and colors, the results were very different. In the nonverbal test, the superior cognitive ability of the bilingual children became evident. They were better than the monolingual children at focusing their attention and ignoring distractions. In addition, they were better at paying attention to change in their environment and using this information to solve complex problems. Furthermore, they were able to remember information about one task while they are working on another task. Bilinguals have to do this all the time when they switch back and forth between languages, so it makes sense that they are able to do this well in other cognitive domains. These studies also examined brain image of the two groups, which showed that the bilinguals were able to perform the task with less mental effort than monolinguals. In other words, their brain worked more efficiently. Cool. This bilingual advantage begin early and last through life. If speakers continue using both language. In a scientific study, 7-month-old baby from a bilingual environment show more cognitive flexibility than baby from a monolingual environment. Scientists played a sound for both groups of baby. The sound was a cue that a dancing puppet would appear on one side of a screen. After the baby listened and watched this is a few times, they began to turn their heads to that side in anticipation of the puppet appearing on the screen. Then the scientists moved the puppet to the other side of the screen. The bilingual babies quickly absorbed this new information and changed the direction of their gaze, whereas the monolingual babies continued to look in the original direction. The scientists interpreted this behavior as the superior ability of bilingual babies to pay attention to cues in their environment and to modify their behavior in response to those cues. Studies of older children have shown that bilingualism can also have a positive impact on school performance. A series of studies comparing the academic performance of monolingual and bilingual children have shown that the bilingual children do better on problem-solving tasks and especially on reading tasks. On other words, bilingualism seems to give a cognitive advantage. One psychologist was interested in whether This bilingual advantage could help children of lower socioeconomic status, who generally have lower test results than students of higher socioeconomic status. In 2009, she has her college conducted a study with particularly exciting results. They indicated that socioeconomic status was less significant in predicting the test score of bilingual children. In other words, even the poor children in the study showed the bilingual advantage in reading and language tests. The authors of the study suggest this is possible that early and sustained bilingualism could compensate for other educational deficits. At the other end of life, scientists have also detected a bilingual advantage as they reach old age. Many adults experience dementia, a gradual loss of their memory and mental abilities. Several studies have shown that lifelong bilingualism can delay these symptoms of dementia by as long as 6 years. The more proficient bilinguals show the longest delay in the onset. Many studies have shown that keeping the brain active can help postpone dementia. It seems bilingualism is one way to do this. Switching from one language to another is a form of mental exercise. Wow. Cultural advantage. The practical and cognitive advantages of knowing more than one language can be measured, but there are other advantages that may be harder to calculate. The cognitive flexibility that comes with knowledge of an additional language may also lead to greater flexibility in social choice and greater tolerance of social and cultural differences. Studies of babies as young as 10 months raised in monolingual and bilingual homes show that monolinguals have a preference for interaction with people who sound familiar, whereas bilinguals are more willing to accept people who sound different. By the age of 5, monolingual children tend to select playmates that sound like they do and read who do not. They have begun to form a group identity. For the bilingual children, group identity more flexible and fluid. The researchers claim that the findings have implications for others as well. They believe that children who grow up with more than one language may become more tolerant of others. Really? Many children who grow up with 2 languages also develop a connection to and an understanding of 2 cultures. Their language creates a bond to their family across generations and a connection to their heritage. Because they understand 2 cultures, they can act as a bridge between them in their families, their communities, and in the wide world. For these reasons, and also for practical reasons, there has been increased interest in heritage language. The idea behind heritage language education is that children from second language communities begin their language education with an advantage. For example, Chinese children in India, in Canada, might be encouraged to develop their knowledge of Mandarin rather than learn a new additional language. This practice builds cultural bonds and strengthens communities at the same time that it improves potential resources for the nation. Multilingualism is a resource for individuals, communities, businesses, and governments. Although English is the dominant world language and is likely to remain so for the immediate future. It stressed that language like empires rise and fall. Knowledge of more than one language will almost certainly be a requirement for the global citizens of the future. The end. Oh my god.